I made the decision in 3 seconds, which is faster than most important decisions but not faster than fear. I was standing in the receiving line on my first morning in the Dragon Palace, one of 16 new staff arrivals being processed by the head steward, and the head steward was moving down the line, asking each person for their name, their village of origin, and their primary skill. The girl 3 places ahead of me answered. The head steward said, "Can you read?" The girl said, "A little, sir." The head steward made a note and moved on. Sable was the best reader in the Veth Valley. She had been taught by the village's retired court recorder, and she had, by the time she was 18, read every book the retired court recorder owned, and had begun writing marginal notes in them. She could read 6 scripts and had taught herself a 7th from a grammar text found in a traveling merchant's abandoned cart. Reading was the thing she was best at. Reading was the thing that had made her the most useful person in the Veth Valley and the most dangerous person in the Dragon Court. At the Dragon Court, she had learned in the 4 days of transport that had brought her here, the staff who could read were assigned to the administrative offices. Administrative office staff had access. Access meant information. Information meant value. Value meant visibility. And visibility, in a court that was currently in the middle of a succession conflict between 3 of the Emperor's senior lords, meant she would be seen by people who would want to use her. The head steward was 2 people away. Sable looked at the floor. She let her face go empty in the specific way of someone who is present in body, but absent in understanding. She had watched people do it in the valley. The ones who survived difficult situations by becoming invisible, by making themselves into furniture. She had never had to do it herself. She understood the principle. The head steward reached her. She looked at him. She did not speak. She spread her hands in the small gesture that means, "I cannot. I am sorry." The head steward made a different note. She was assigned to the laundry. Peter Drucker, the management theorist, wrote, "The most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't said." Sable had not read Drucker, but she had arrived at the same conclusion by the end of her first week in the laundry. The laundry staff were invisible. This was not a figure of speech. The court moved around them the way a river moves around stones, continuously, without acknowledgement, with an adjustment that had become so habitual, it no longer registered as adjustment. She could fold linen in the corridor outside a planning meeting and hear the full meeting through the door, and no one in the meeting room considered the possibility that the laundry girl in the corridor could understand what was being said. She listened to everything. She memorized what she heard. She processed it the way she had processed the retired court recorder's books, methodically, with categories, with an awareness of what connected to what. What she learned in the first week. There were 3 lords in conflict over the emperor's right to name a successor from outside the bloodline. The conflict had been running for 4 years. 2 of the lords had support from outside factions. One lord, Toreth, was operating alone and was therefore either very confident or very desperate. The emperor knew about all 3 of them and had been allowing the conflict to develop at its natural rate, which suggested he intended to let it resolve in a specific direction. Sable did not yet know which direction. What she also learned, the emperor's name was Daric. He was not what she had imagined an emperor would be. She had imagined someone who filled a room with deliberate weight, someone who performed authority. He was not that. He was contained in a way that made the room feel larger than he was, which was a different kind of authority, and, she was realizing, a considerably more effective one. She learned his habits the way she learned the habits of the court, through accumulated observation. He walked the East Wing archive corridor every morning before the court opened. He reviewed petition requests personally on Tuesdays. He ate in the Great Hall on formal days, and in a small private room behind the throne room on informal ones. He read for 2 hours after the evening meal, always at the window in the archive reading room, facing west. She never intended for him to notice her. He noticed her on day 11. She was mopping the corridor outside the archive reading room when he passed. He always passed at the same time, and she had confirmed through 4 days of observation that the mop could be positioned as cover without blocking his route. He walked past. He walked past every servant without acknowledgement, not from cruelty but from the court habit of not interrupting the work of people doing their jobs. He stopped. He turned. He looked at her for one full second, with that specific quality of attention she had already learned to recognize in him. Full, present, taking in more than was offered. Then he continued to the archive reading room. Sable resumed mopping, and told herself it meant nothing. He noticed her again on day 14. This time she was in the petition review room, one of 3 staff assigned to organize the petition scrolls before the Tuesday session. The scrolls were sorted by category: trade disputes in the red ribbons, property claims in the blue, personal appeals in the green. She was sorting them. He entered early. She did not know he entered early because she was facing away from the door and there was no sound of approach, and she had been trained by his habits to expect him at a specific time, and this was 12 minutes before that time. When she turned around, he was standing in the doorway watching her sort scrolls. What he was observing, if he was observant enough, she was not sorting by category. She was sorting within categories. The red ribbon trade dispute scrolls were being organized by the date of first filing, which placed the oldest unresolved disputes at the top and the newest at the bottom. No one had asked her to do this. The previous Tuesday's session had processed scrolls in random order. She had been thinking, while she sorted, about the petitioner who had been waiting the longest. The other 2 staff members were sorting by size, largest scrolls first, because the scrolls were easier to read when sorted by size. She felt his gaze on the back of her head for 3 seconds before she turned. She met his eyes and looked at the floor immediately, the way a laundry servant would, the way she had been doing for 14 days. "How long have you been in the palace?" he said. She held up her hands, the same gesture. "I cannot. I am sorry." He looked at the scrolls she had sorted. He looked at her. His expression did not change, but there was something in the precise quality of his stillness that she had learned to read. He was thinking about something, and the thinking was significant. He went to his desk. She finished sorting. When the session began, he reviewed the scrolls in the order she had organized them, oldest disputes first. She was not in the room to see this. She learned it from a petition clerk who mentioned it to another clerk in the corridor afterward, with the specific bewilderment of someone who cannot explain why the routine changed. On day 21, she made a mistake. She did not intend to make a mistake. She had been careful for 21 days, and careful was what she did well. But on day 21, she was assigned to dust the archive reading room during the midday break, when the emperor was at the formal court session, and the archive reading room had 2,000 books, and one of those books was a comparative grammar of 6 ancient scripts that she had not seen before and had not known existed, and which she picked up to look at the spine of, and then, before she understood she was doing it, opened to check the publisher's colophon. She had the book open for 40 seconds. She set it down. She completed her dusting. She left. On day 22, she arrived at the archive reading room for her morning corridor duty, and found a note tucked under the mop handle. The note said, in script 7, which was the rarest of the 6 scripts she could read, and the one that she had taught herself from a grammar text in a merchant's abandoned cart. "The comparative grammar is on the reading table. You may borrow it when I am not using it." Sable stood in the corridor with the note, and understood 2 things simultaneously. First, he had seen her open the book. He had been in the room when she thought she was alone, or he had observed her afterward through some means she had not identified. Second, he had written the note in script 7, which means he knew she could read script 7, which means he had already known, before the note, that she was not mute and not illiterate. She stood in the corridor for a long time. She could leave. She could request reassignment. She could move to a different part of the palace and hope that his attention would not follow. She thought about the petition scrolls organized oldest first. She thought about a man who paid attention to what servants were doing with scrolls in the petition room. She put the note in her pocket and resumed mopping. That afternoon she borrowed the comparative grammar. She learned about the bond on day 31, from an old woman who worked in the palace's records archive. The woman's name was Preva. She had been in the palace for 50 years and knew things that were not in any official record because she had been present when they happened. Preva did not reveal what she knew directly. She revealed it the way old women in palaces reveal important things. Sideways. In context. With apparent irrelevance. The emperor's mother had it. Preva said one afternoon. while they were sorting old document boxes together. The bond sensitivity ran in the family. His grandfather, too. They could all tell things about people without being told. Sable looked at her. Tell things, she repeated. She was using words carefully. She had been using words carefully around Preva for a week. Not all things. Not reading minds. Preva sorted another document. More like, whether someone was what they were presenting themselves to be. Whether there was a gap between the surface and what was underneath. She paused. His grandfather called it the bone truth sense. You can't fool it. It doesn't read what you say or how you hold yourself. It reads something underneath that. Sable was very still. Is it the same as the bond mark? She said. Preva looked at her sharply. Not the sharpness of suspicion, the sharpness of recognition. The bone truth sense is what the bond uses as its mechanism, Preva said. When the bond activates, the bone truth sense goes in both directions. He knows what you are underneath, and you start knowing things about him. Sable thought about the things she had been knowing about the Emperor for the past 31 days. The way she could tell when he was tired before his face showed it. The way she knew, standing outside a closed door, whether he was in the room on the other side. The way she had been aware, since approximately day 12, of a warmth in the center of her chest that intensified when she was near the archive building and diminished when she was in the far western quarters. That started already, she said. I know, Preva said. I have been watching it happen since your first week. She paused again, in the way of someone deciding what to say next. He knows, Preva said. He has known longer than you have. He has been waiting for you to tell him. He will not come to you first. He has been very careful about that. Why? Sable said. Preva looked at her with the particular patience of 50 years in a court that had taught her the value of accurate information delivered at the right time. Because the bond does not require consent, Preva said. But he does. She had been thinking about what Preva said for 9 days when the Emperor spoke to her soul. She did not know that was what it was. When it happened, she was in the West Laundry, alone, at the 4th hour of morning, finishing the last of the ceremonial linens that needed to be processed before the festival preparation in 2 days. Everyone else had gone to bed. The palace was at its quietest. She was folding, mechanically, thinking about the conversation with Preva and about script 7 and about the comparative grammar she had nearly finished. She was not thinking about him. She was actively not thinking about him, because thinking about him had become, in the past 9 days, a thing that took effort to stop once started. She heard his voice. Not with her ears. It was not a sound in the room. It was a sound in the part of her that was below hearing, a warmth, and a word, and the specific quality of someone speaking with deliberate gentleness, the way you speak to someone you have been careful with for a long time, and are choosing, now, to stop being careful with in this one particular way. The word was her name. Her real name. Not the name the head steward had put in the records. Her actual name, the one she had not told anyone in this palace. Sable. She sat down on the laundry room floor because her knees had decided that standing was no longer the appropriate response to the situation. She sat there for a moment with the warmth in her chest that was no longer ambient and incidental, but direct and specific and aimed. And she understood what Preva had meant. The bond goes in both directions. He had known her name because the bond truth sense had told him her real name the same way it had told him about the scrolls and the grammar text. He had held it for however long he had known it, and he had not used it. He was using it now because something had changed. She pressed her hand against her sternum, against the warmth. She thought very deliberately, with the same focus she brought to script translation. I hear you. The warmth steadied, became something more continuous. He had been in the archive reading room. She knew this not from observation but from the bond, which now had a directionality to it. She knew where he was, the way she knew which door was north in a room she had never entered. She sat on the laundry room floor until her knees agreed to work again. She asked him, 10 days later, what he had been hearing. They were in the archive reading room, which had become, in the weeks since the note in script 7, the unofficial space where they occupied the same room without pretense. She sat at the reading table with the comparative grammar. He sat at the desk across from it. They read. Occasionally, she asked him a question about a reference she did not recognize. He answered. They did not perform comfort with each other, they simply were comfortable, which is different and considerably rarer. What did the bond tell you? She said. When I was not speaking. He set down his book. The first thing it told me, he said, was that you were not mute. I knew this on day 5. I chose not to act on it, because I did not know why you had chosen silence, and the reason mattered. What else? That you were frightened of the administrative offices, and not of the laundry, which told me you were hiding a specific skill, rather than all of them. He paused. That you were reading, consistently, for the duration of your time here, somewhere in the palace, in hours when you were supposed to be resting. I did not know what you were reading until I saw you with the grammar. And after the grammar, I knew the language, not that you could read it. That is not the kind of knowledge the bond delivers. But the language itself is rare enough that there are perhaps 30 people in the palace who know it exists, and 4 who can read it. He looked at her. You are the 5th. What else did it tell you? She said. He was quiet for a moment. That you were lonely, he said. Not in the way of someone who misses people, in the way of someone who has stopped expecting to be known. She looked at the table. The bond is intrusive, she said. Yes, he said. I have been aware of that since day 5. I would have told you sooner, but I was still determining whether you would receive the information as an invasion or as an explanation. It depends on what you intend to do with what you know, she said. I know, he said. That is why I waited. She looked at the comparative grammar, which she had nearly finished. She looked at him across the reading table and thought about the word he had spoken in the laundry room at the 4th hour of morning, and how it had felt like being located after being lost for a long time. You could have told me on day 5, she said. Yes, he said. It would have been easier. Easier is not always better, he said. You needed to decide to trust me before you knew about the bond. If I had told you on day 5, you would not have known whether the trust was yours or the bond's. She sat with this. He was right. She did not want him to be right, because it was annoying to have someone have thought through something more carefully than she had. But he was right. I trusted you, she said, before I knew about the bond. I want to be clear about that. I know, he said. The bond told me. The bond is very inconvenient, she said. Yes, he agreed. It is. She said it in the petition review room on a Tuesday, which was either poetic or accidental, and she never entirely decided which. The petition session had ended. The other staff had left. She was organizing the reviewed scrolls into their archive categories when she heard the door open and did not turn, because she knew without turning who was there. The Lord Toreth had entered the room. He was one of the 3 lords in the succession conflict, the one operating alone. She had been tracking his movements for 2 months, through the information that passed by the laundry and the information that passed by the archive corridor, and the information the bond occasionally delivered about the Emperor's awareness of specific people in the palace. Toreth was careful in the way that genuinely dangerous people are careful, systematically, without visible edge. He had entered the room because the petition session was over and the Emperor was gone, and there was one remaining staff member alone in the room who could be asked questions. Or pressured. The two were not always distinguishable. He said, You, the mute girl, who is reviewing the succession petitions? She did not turn around. She organized the blue ribbon scrolls. I know you understand me, he said. He stepped closer. You are not mute. I have been watching you for 3 weeks. I know what you can hear and what you are doing with it. He paused. Tell me what you know about the Emperor's intentions for succession, and I will ensure that you are not here for the outcome of the conflict. You will be gone before anything happens. You will be safe. Sable set down the scroll she was holding. She turned around. She looked at Lord Toreth for exactly as long as it took her to assess the confidence in his posture, the threat underneath the offer, the specific calculation in his eyes of someone who had decided she was useful and would be discarded when usefulness ended. She said in a clear voice, the first full sentence she had spoken aloud in this palace for 6 months. You should leave this room before the Emperor arrives. Toreth's expression shifted. You can speak, he said. I can speak, she said. And the Emperor is in the corridor outside this door. He has been for approximately 2 minutes. I would estimate you have 30 seconds to decide whether to be here when he enters. Toreth left. He left with the speed of someone who had not achieved his position by being slow to recognize danger. The door opened 14 seconds later. Daric entered the room. He looked at the door. He looked at her. He had heard what she said, not through the closed door but through the bond, which had been carrying her voice to him before she made a sound. That was the first sentence, he said. Yes, she said. The first full sentence in 6 months. Yes. He walked across the petition room, and he stood in front of her, and he did not touch her, and he did not look away. Was it worth the wait? She said. He said, say something else. She looked at him. 6 months of silence. 6 months of scrolls organized by date, and books borrowed without asking, and a warmth in her chest that had grown from ambient to specific to something she did not have the right word for yet. She said, I have been reading your archive for 4 months. You are missing 43 years of Eastern border records between year 287 and year 330. Someone removed them. I know which cabinet they were removed from because the dust pattern is wrong. They are in the secondary archive basement, behind the climate-controlled section, in a false-back cabinet that was installed in year 341. He stared at her. I have been looking for those records for 60 years, he said. I know, she said. I found the cross-references in year 289's trade documentation and worked backward. She paused. I also know who Toreth's external faction contact is. It is your third steward's brother. The brother has been receiving payments from the Eastern Coalition since year 844. I found the payment records in the Petition archive under a misfiled property claim. He was very still. How long have you known this? He said. The record location, 41 days. Toreth's contact, 9 days. She looked at him directly. I did not know how to tell you without telling you everything. And now you are telling me everything. Now I am telling you everything, she said. A silence. Not the silence of the past 6 months. Something different. The silence of 2 people who have finished becoming known to each other and are standing in the space on the other side of that. The 43 years of missing records, he said. Do you know what is in them? Border negotiations with the Northern Territories, she said. The original treaty terms. The ones that were changed before the public record was filed. He looked at her with an expression she finally had a name for. She had been finding names for his expressions for 2 months, and this one she had been waiting to see because she had known, through the bond, that it existed. She had known it was the expression that came before something else. I need a head of archive intelligence, he said. Someone who can read what the records do not say as well as what they do. That is not a formal position, she said. It will be, he said, when I create it. Tomorrow. The title, she said. He considered. What title do you want? She thought about 6 months of corridors and laundry, and the particular invisibility of people who are assumed to be unable to understand what passes around them. She thought about what she had learned in those 6 months, and how much more she would learn in the next 6 if she were visible rather than invisible. Keep the position unofficial, she said. Officially, I am still laundry staff. He understood immediately. She could see it. The invisibility is the value, he said. The invisibility is the value, she confirmed. She picked up the last of the petition scrolls and organized it into its category. He watched her. One more thing, she said without looking up. Yes. The word you spoke. In the laundry room. At the 4th hour of morning. She set the scroll down and looked at him. You already knew what the bond was telling you. You knew for 31 days before that night. Why did you speak then? Specifically, what changed? He was quiet for a moment. You sat down on the floor, he said. I sat down on the floor because my knees stopped working, she said. I know, he said. You sat down on the floor, and the bond carried the whole of that to me, and it was the first time in 31 days that you stopped working so hard. You let something land. He paused. I spoke because you finally had both hands available to receive it. Sable stood in the petition room and felt the warmth in her chest, which had been many things over many weeks, settle into something it had not been before. Home was a word she had not used about a place since the Veth Valley. She was using it, carefully, experimentally, about this room, this palace, this conversation. She would keep testing it. She was fairly confident it would hold. 6 months later, the palace had a laundry staff of 4, and an unofficial archive intelligence function that no one in the court had a name for, and most of the senior lords had noticed, in the way that you notice something you cannot quite see, a pattern in the information the emperor had that they could not account for, a readiness he demonstrated in situations he should not have been ready for, a quality to his awareness that had sharpened since the previous year and that none of them could attribute to a source. The missing 43 years of Eastern border records had been restored to the archive. The treaty terms they contained had resolved 4 ongoing border disputes in a single session that the court was still discussing. No one in the court knew how the emperor had known about the missing records. Lord Toreth had resigned his court position in the spring, citing personal reasons. The third steward's brother had relocated to the eastern provinces. These things had happened quietly, without announcement, in the way that the most significant things in courts tend to happen. Sable still worked in the laundry on 2 mornings a week. It was not performance, it was practice. The laundry corridors were the best information environment in the palace, and she had spent 6 months learning exactly how to use them, and she saw no reason to stop. She also had a desk in the archive reading room. The desk had been there for 4 months. No official record named whose desk it was. Several senior archive staff had begun, in the past 2 months, to address questions about missing records or unusual cross-references directly to whoever happened to be sitting at that desk, because whoever was sitting at that desk consistently had the answer. The comparative grammar lived on the desk now. She had finished it twice and begun her notes toward a 7th script that the grammar had led her toward. The notes were written in a cipher she had developed herself. She had taught the cipher to one person. She was reading those notes on an evening when Daric came to the archive room and sat across from her and read, which was what he did, which was what she had come to understand as the shape of this. 2 people comfortable in the same room, comfortable in the same quiet, with occasional questions and occasional answers, and the bond between them as ambient and steady as temperature. The 7th script, he said, after a while, without looking up from his book. I think I have found the grammatical logic, she said. It is written phonetically, not symbolically. The symbols stand for sounds, not meanings. Show me, he said. She brought the notes to his desk and explained the grammatical logic she had found. He listened the way he listened to everything, fully, with specific questions that indicated he was following her reasoning and not simply her conclusion. She had said thousands of words since the petition room. She had not stopped. She had found that the silence of 6 months had not closed anything in her but had only stored it, and what it had stored had found its way out in the months since, steadily, without drama. She spoke, and he listened. He spoke, and she listened. The bond ran between them the way a river runs between 2 banks, not owned by either, necessary to both, older than the 2 of them by a considerable distance. This was not a conclusion. It was a beginning that had found its own pace. I did not choose silence because I was afraid to speak. I chose silence because I was afraid to be known before I knew who was listening. I knew who was listening, eventually, and I have not stopped since.